everyone. Welcome to Achieving Success with Olivia Akin. I'm your host, Olivia Akin. Each week, we will discuss the roadmap of achieving your personal and professional success. We will give you real life stories on growing personally and professionally to achieve your life and career goals with the help of some top notch guests. Today, we are speaking with April Bell. April Bell is a wisdom story alchemist and founder of innovative storytelling methodologies that have transformed how people connect with their authentic voice. April is the author of My Life in Paragraphs, Find and Tell Your Stories, and co creator of Storycatcher for iPhone, a value driven storytelling app that has been featured in New York Times, Wired, USA Today, and Fox News. With nearly 2 decades of experience guiding everyone from corporate leaders to community elders through her values based personal storytelling process, April has developed a unique approach to helping people uncover the wisdom embedded in their life experiences. Her workshops and leadership programs have empowered countless individuals to understand not just what they believe, but why they believe it, creating a foundation for clear decision making in careers, relationships, and personal growth. You can find April by going to her website, aprilbell.com, or by email at hello@aprilbell.com or on LinkedIn by searching April G. Bell. Hello, April. It's fantastic having you on the show today.
Hi, Olivia. Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it. I'm excited to talk to you about
Um,
storytelling.
yes, I love this topic. So let's dive right in. To start off the show, can you tell me what success means and looks like to April Bell?
That's such an interesting question. So, I spend most of my time gathering stories from other people.
Mhm.
So, then to think about my own story is a little, different, like flipping the script. But for me, on a larger scale, it's really about has been about finding purpose, following my heart, and being a true contribution to others and helping them do the same.
I love that. And I love the fact that you bring in the contribution aspect. And going off that, you call yourself a wisdom story alchemist, which is a beautiful and unique title within itself. What led you to that specific definition for your work and calling yourself and branding that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it didn't come quickly or easily. And I spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to, what do I call myself? So when I first started doing life story work, it started with doing life story biographies for people. So I would film and interview them to talk about their life story, about their ancestors, their values and philosophies, and then to pass that out on for generations to come. And then at that time, I founded an organization called the Association of Personal Historians. So I called myself a personal historian. And back in 2008, I would go around and people are like, oh, that's so interesting. I've never heard of that before. And as I evolved in my work, and as my work evolved, I was have been helping people in different ways. And what it came down to is really getting that the true, what I really bring to the party is I have this way of helping people see things in a new light, to see themselves in a different way. To, like, so many times when I'm interviewing or somebody or working with them, they'll be telling me about their story, their values, or what that is that they're wanting to communicate, and I'll come in with a different angle, and they're like, "Oh, I never thought of it that way." So, alchemy is bringing two things together and making something new. So it's really helping people dig into their past experiences, their learned experiences, their wisdom, and reshaping that to communicate the essence of who they really are in a really elegant way.
And let's talk about the essence and being able to tell that story in an impactful way, an elegant way, all the things. As you're hearing different stories and you get told a lot of different stories, how do you differentiate between a regular story and a wisdom story?
Yeah. For me, it's, if you, so our learning experiences are what have created our wisdom inside of us.
Mhm.
And so fundamentally, if did you learn something? Did something change? Is there some part of the story where you changed and you learned something from that, and then that changed who you were and how you did things going forward? So that nugget of learning is the piece of wisdom.
And how do you, when someone's like, I'm gonna phrase it this way, I'm thinking through this question in real time, right? For you, there's moments in our life, our everyday life, where we can say, oh, well, this might not be important. But those stories shape us, as you just said, and really transform how we show up. So, how do you, in your own life and when you work with people, try to make sure you're reflecting on all the moments, not just the moments where you're like, well, that was just a regular day. Nothing truly happened, but that piece of the story could be really important.
Well, if you really look, every day can be an extraordinary day. Oftentimes, we're just kind of like running to the next thing. So then we don't take the time to notice what those moments, experiences, interactions are that could be extraordinary. But in regard to finding those stories for yourself, well, so I have one of the people I really like is Derek Sivers. Started CD Baby. And if you don't know who he is, look him up. He's fascinating. But one of the things that he likes to say is obvious to you, amazing to others. So the thing is that we run through our daily lives and we just do what we do because that's who we are. And we don't think that there's anything special about us. Like people say, like, oh, it's, it's just the water you swim in. But then when you start to tell your stories or reflect on your stories, what is obvious to you can then become like, oh, that's actually my superpower. Oh, that's something special and unique that I do. And so then that's the value of kind of like practicing storytelling. So finding your stories, doing it in a group or a community, because most times like it's just not going to happen in a vacuum. It's listening and telling. So it's listening to other people's stories and then seeing ourselves in them, and then that creates connection points of like, oh, I have a story about that might be valuable for others to hear, or that would really illustrate who I am. And then it's also in the telling, because there's one thing that happens inside our head, and then there's a whole different thing that happens when we actually say it out loud or take a little time to try and arrange it in such a way that it, lands in the way that we want to land, or, communicates a value, or, just anything that we want somebody to understand about us or product or service, the organization that we belong to. So it's in that practice. So just like any musician has to practice their instrument, it's if you want to. So we're all storytellers. We're born with it. Like, anybody can learn to tell a story. It's a skill. And like with any skill, the more you practice, the better you become.
And that being said, too, because you mentioned the stories previously, you mentioned identifying the nuggets and what was the challenge, how did you learn from it? You have helped people carry decades of lived experience without stopping to ask what their stories reveal about who they are and uncovering that with them. What was the moment for you where you asked yourself that question?
So, oh gosh, my life is a divine comedy. So, I developed the Storycatcher app back in I had the idea in 2011, and then we launched in 2013. So I've had that product for a long time, and it was, we wanted to find a way to help people tell personal stories on the fly, and then we also give them questions to ask so that you can tell values-based story. Anyway, so that's, the nutshell of that. But since the app was called, so the app was called Storycatcher, but then I go out and meet people and they're like, oh yeah, you're the storyteller. And I'm like, no, I'm the story catcher. You're the storyteller. And I had been interviewing people for years about their life stories. And this was even after I had developed my workshop and been working with people that way. And in 2021, I took a workshop. I wanted to work on my own storytelling skills for myself, and then, but really to help other people in my work. So I took a workshop, and I really had it when I took that workshop that I was going to like do my about me story or something like that. Like I was very hard headed about what I was going to get out of it. And long story short is that I ended up having to take it twice, because the first time I was so kind of bullheaded about doing it my way and wanting to tell this really big story, that the second time, so I didn't get out of it what the value that it offered. And so then I decided to take it again. And the second time I was like, I'm just going to go into this for the fun of it and not be so significant. And what happened from that was incredible, because one, I gave myself permission to explore and tell my own stories without an agenda, so it didn't have to be attached to my business. And I had this huge aha moment, and like one of the first stories that I told of that, the way that cohort worked is that you would work on a story, then share the story, then everybody gave feedback. And this particular story I told, to me, it had a specific meaning and purpose and communicated a point in my life. And then the feedback that I got from one of the people in the cohort was that it landed for her in such a way that she saw something in her own life that helped her take the next step on the path that she was going on, that actually didn't have that much to do with my story, but it really made a difference in her life. And I was like, oh, well, one, like my stories matter. Like I can tell my story in a very personal way that feels like it's just about me. And then in reality, it really made a difference in somebody else's life, like a life-altering difference. She made a life-altering choice based on, oh, well, if she can do that, I can do that. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that was a big aha for me of like, oh, I'm the reluctant storyteller. I have a story in my book about my favorite client, Elizabeth. So when her son had hired me to interview her, and when I got to her house, she answered the door. She's like all warm and friendly, and I come inside, and her son comes up and welcomes me, and then like she's being like super warm and friendly, and then she turns to him and she's like, do we really need to be doing this? And I was like, oh, I think I'll go set up my gear. And then like she was just resisting it the whole time. And like, I mean, it's comical. I'm like putting the microphone on her and she's kind of like taking it off. And finally her son is like, Mom, please just do it for me. I want to have your story. And she's like, okay. And then we sit down, I push record, and 3 hours later, she's still talking. She's like reading me poetry, and she's got this incredible life story. And she didn't think she had anything to share. And she had, could have gone on and on. And she did continue to go on and on after that, telling even more stories. So part of it is that, so then I just found it so ironic that in the end I found out that I too was the reluctant storyteller. So it is like an uncomfortable space even for me, because it requires a degree of vulnerability to tell a really good story. So you have to like, kind of open your heart and trust and, figure out the pathway of like where to do that, how to do that. but the reward is so, um yeah, I guess that's what I'll say about that. So yeah, even I was a reluctant storyteller, and so then I've been beating this drum. Your story matters. Well, guess what? So does mine. So I am walking the same path of anybody that I work with.
And I I know because I think we all can serve people better when we walk that path and that journey as well. How has that helped you relate to individuals as well when they're in that reluctant phase, knowing like, okay, I've been reluctant myself. Is there moments of like reflection points for you where I was like, okay, oh, I do this too. Are there points where like to get them more comfortable, you share your story?
Yeah. So, well, it expanded my compassion. Like, I already, part of why I do what I do is that, I mean, I did this whole process years ago. I was like obsessed with finding purpose. Like, what's my purpose? I'm not alone in that one, I know. And I was also lucky enough that I met a woman that was a true purpose life coach, and I did her program, and it took like 8 or 9 weeks. And at the end, I figured out this whole life story thing, and I was like, wow, that really is perfect for me. And part of that is that I do have a way of making people feel comfortable, and they open up and they trust me, and I also set the table for them to know, like, I really honor confidentiality. And so, like, when I'm filming people, if they want stuff cut out, I cut it out right away. And but so I just naturally have this way of making people feel comfortable and drawing their stories out. And I love to go deep. And not everybody is super comfortable with that, but I would, I could hold the space and take them there. And I did, I did a good job at that. However, when I really had to put myself in that vulnerable, when I really pushed myself into the vulnerable space, because I was always telling my stories, just when I took this workshop, I went a whole level deeper. And that really opened up my compassion for what other people were going through as I was working with them, of what they felt comfortable sharing or how they wanted to share it. So yeah, it just expanded my awareness so that I could hold that space better and be more, I don't know, kind and generous and empowering to help them communicate what they want to communicate.
Well, talking about holding space as well, because as you mentioned too, sometimes there's heavy stories. Sometimes you can go down a path in your own story and in your own journey that is not expected. Sometimes hearing someone's story, as you mentioned earlier, can trigger a seeing of yourself and making a decision. So, how do you make sure when you're recording someone and meeting someone and helping them say that story and all of their stories, that you're holding the space for them to be as comfortable as they can, even when sometimes, because we all have those moments, there's things that shock you, right? Or you're like, oh, I wasn't expecting us going down this path. How do you handle that?
I think in the interview, when I do the interviews, that's kind of a different animal, because that's like a real time experience of where the person is sharing. And also, they're aware that we're doing this for, it's going to be shared. It's private. They're private documentaries for their family, but they're also aware of like who their audience is. So one is that, frankly, I just trust my intuition on how to kind of like guide us along to keep things positive. And also, if people want to share the things, we talk about how they are going to be comfortable doing that. So then when I work with people in regard to telling certain story, working on the story before they share it,
Mhm.
I talk a lot about discernment. And so from my perspective, the secret sauce to any good story is being vulnerable. But the thing is that you really need to be discerning about how vulnerable that you're willing to be. So if it's something that you haven't completely worked out for yourself yet, you don't want to
Mhm.
get on a stage and talk about that in front of a group of people, because then you're going to have to deal with the aftermath of the effect that that'll have on you. Um, so then it's really being aware of, what you're comfortable sharing. So then what I recommend with that is that, if you have a piece of your story that you are, testing out to see if you really want to go that deep, is to share it with a really close and trusted friend and see how you feel and see the feedback that they get. Because the funny thing about vulnerability is it's like that thing that we think makes us look, foolish or weak, or like, we made the wrong decision or whatever. That's that piece that everyone connects with. And then when you tell the rest of your story, that's the thing that makes you like, oh my God, that was so amazing that you did that. You like, whatever you got through or triumphed over. So it's a fine line to walk, and also to be self-aware of what you're ready to share, and also be mindful of your audience too, because like you don't want to overshare and freak them out. So it's being, aware of what you're ready to say and what your audience is ready to receive.
And there also is a journey in that, like you said. And I love how you bring up the ability for all of us to know that the vulnerabilities are the moments that not only shape us, but will make someone relate to us and be like, oh no, she gets it, right? Or he gets it. Or, really connect on that deeper level. But it's also about being able to be comfortable in that space, as you said, and to going, okay, I'm going to practice this. I'm going to tell this to one person first before I get on the microphone or I get on that stage. You also created Storycatcher, which you mentioned earlier. You've written a book and worked with corporate leaders. How do you decide which medium or approach is right for helping someone uncover those wisdom stories?
Well, I mean, it kind of goes back to what you're just saying of like, so the thing is in the practice. So, you can think about like, oh, this thing makes me feel a little bit vulnerable. So I'm going to share it with my best friend, or I'm going to share it with a couple of close people on my team, or, and then seeing how it lands. And then the thing is with that vulnerability, like that's where our humanity lives. And that's how we connect with people on a human level. So as we, wade deeper and deeper into that pond, then it gets easier. It's like, like going to the gym and building a muscles. Like the more you do it, the easier it becomes, because you realize you're like, oh, I'm not going to die. Like, oh, that actually like opened something up with these people. And now they're sharing more deeply with me. And now we're more connected, and now we're being more productive together. So it's a process of, taking one step at a time. And it's a very, that's a very individual thing of like, when do you feel comfortable doing it? Who do you feel comfortable doing it with? And so then what matters is giving it a try and seeing what happens. And then really the most powerful way to do that too is to invite the other person to also share. So then, you're not just putting stuff on other people, you're having an exchange. And so then you're kind of in it together, and then everybody kind of grows and expands together. I don't know if that
Talking
answers your
about
question.
growing and expanding, as well as telling those powerful, authentic stories, you mentioned that sharing And you've said this in different pieces throughout our conversation so far that, sharing the authentic stories is one of the most powerful ways to bring people together. In our current climate, why do you think storytelling has become even more crucial? I mean, you're seeing it through podcasting, conversations, you're seeing it in different spaces, but also in the environment we are. Why do you think storytelling is so crucial?
Well, yeah. So I often refer to it as personal storytelling. So like I'm super passionate about personal storytelling. And oh God, I could say so much about this, but for so long we've been told that there is, a framework, a process, a list, oh, like these all these different containers or the way that it's done. And people have gone on these self-improvement paths, this way, that way, the other way, to try and reach their level of a success that the outside world is saying this is what you need to do. Like, it's all over YouTube now. It's like, you're doing it wrong. And, it's like the clickbait of you're doing it wrong. And I'm going to tell you how to do it right. And so, we've all now gotten oversaturated with that. And we're like, hey, no, I really don't think that that's the answer. So, I mean, I think we really know and understand that the answer to really having a successful life isn't found out there. It's looking inside, looking at my own humanity, looking at what's important to me. Like, so then, the thing is, if I follow my heart, hopefully you'll follow yours too, right? So it's not like we're all supposed to fit into this one cookie cutter. It's like, no, we're all different. We bring our own contribution. And the more that we listen to and tell each other our stories, we give each other the support and the permission to continue to do that. And so I think that people are really hungry for that, living an authentic life, having the permission to do that. So, I mean, I think that's kind of like, this grassroots sea change of not being so driven by consumer culturalism and, finding our true path of what is meaningful and successful, what that means to us personally.
Mhm. For someone listening who's thinking, I want to get better using my voice and telling my story, what's the best first step you'd recommend them to take that they could take today?
To practice. Um, yeah, really to practice storytelling. But the first thing that you could do that's easy is start listening for the stories in your life. Just out in random, like, is it strangers? Is it your friends and family? Like there's a lot of people that just have like these really surface conversations, but then, you catch these nuggets of people telling stories about their life. And so then if you hear something that creates a question, ask that, elicit stories from other people and listen to what it is that they have to say. Find what you feel to be interesting and see if you can find folks that are interested in listening to your stories too. But
And
yeah,
I
it's
want
just
to,
like looking for stories in your daily life.
I love that. I'm going to start practicing that as well. And now I want to flip the script on you a little bit. So we just talked about, and you answered what is the first thing and a good first step to practice telling authentic and wisdom stories. What should someone avoid doing in the early stages or of exploring their own stories?
That's a good one. So then that was the I learned that's another I don't know. I think I've learned everything the hard way, but I learned that one the hard way. The perfect place to start is telling stories about small meaningful moments. Just a small little thing that happened. Tell that story. Because the mistake that people often make is they're like, oh, I need to tell my story. And then they want to tell this big, huge, massive story that's actually a tons of little tiny stories. And then it just becomes difficult and overwhelming, and they want to go have a beer instead.
That's a good one. Because sometimes too, when you're a talker or you have ADHD, the story starts one direction and then another story gets added in and another story. I've done that myself. There's times, right? I'm like, oh, wait. And then we're going down a path and someone asks a question and now we turn right. And then I'm like, no, but I need to circle back around to the original point as well.
Right?
Uh,
So, right, the tangents. And so then that's the thing when you're telling a story is then so then that's a good thing to listen for is where those tangents happen. So if you're actually wanting to tell a specific story that makes a point, you dilute it. We dilute it when we bring those tangents in. I completely guilty talk that way all the time. Um so then when crafting like a wisdom story or something like that is to just like be really mindful of keeping those tangents out of the equation so that we stay on track and land the plane and don't distract. So then that would be another good thing to listen for is like when these tangents come in. And then that
for
really
your,
helps, like being mindful of that helps so much in communication.
well, and for yourself, how have you practiced not going on tangents as much?
So yeah, I belong to a storytelling community and we do storytelling every Wednesday morning. And so then that helps me. So being in that practice of, so I learned, a structure and a framework of the pieces of my story. And that because I have that framework, which that's also in my book, is that it helps keep me in line so that I don't go squirrel. And then because I'm mindful of what those pieces are, then I can be like, oh, does this fit? Or does this
Mhm.
not fit? So then when I'm doing it in a structured way, when I'm working on a story that I'm going to share later, in a speaking situation or whatever, that is useful. But then also practicing on the fly, it's really helpful for me to think in real time of like getting pulled by that tangent and going, is that going to add to this or is it going to distract? And then I can, stop and recenter myself.
Well, talking about adding versus distracting in stories too, how do you know when you've shared too much versus not sharing enough in a story?
That's a really good question. That's also a practice. So that goes, I mean, the thing that comes up for me is, just, like what I was talking about, vulnerability. So, so the thing about being vulnerable is that you feel that little rise of emotion, and then you have to be like, oh, am I going to be okay sharing this? Like, there's always going to be some trepidation. Otherwise, you're not being vulnerable. So, it's important to know yourself and knowing where your boundaries are and how you feel safe. And so, and that's one of the things that I really love about personal storytelling is that it is very transformational. Because as we look back on the turning points, the lessons, the changes that we've gone through, we really get to know who we are and what we're capable of. And so then all that stuff sort of feeds into the awareness of, am I oversharing or not sharing enough? It's for me, it's a feeling. So, and then of like, I know when I'm holding back. And then I also know, I don't know, sometimes I'm being like, oh, that might have been a little bit too much for this group. But I actually think that that can be really valuable for people. Like it helps
Mhm.
expand folks. But yeah, it's more of a feeling and it's something that comes with practice. So then, like some of the people that are in my storytelling community, they'll, I'll think that they told a great story and they'll be like, oh, I kind of phoned it in. And I was like, oh, okay. There was more there. So it was just like their comfort level of where they thought they could go.
Well, and I do too. I hear what you're saying, and I'm like, yep, I do that too. I'll gauge. in a room and who I'm talking to, and kind of facial expressions and things like that. Like, okay, can I say this? Can I make a joke and it land as I'm telling this story or communicating XYZ to them? Or is this not the space for that? And that also made me think, even when I shared, there's times I'm like, maybe that was oversharing, but I'm like, own it. As long as you're like, okay, yeah, I did that. Like, it is what it is. Whether it's good, bad, and someone resonates with it, or you're like, yeah, that probably was too much for the conversation. Making yourself grounded in the fact, like, yeah, I did it. Okay. Like, I shared that over, like, moving on. I think it makes it way easier and makes you way more comfortable in the situation.
Yeah, and also, gosh. So, one of the things that is challenging for many people to do is to really show up as their real self. So,
Mhm.
especially in workspaces, we put on whatever hat we think we're supposed to wear because that's what you're supposed to do. So, I wrote I shared it, actually, I did a story at a story slam. I think it was 2 years ago now, but and it speaks perfectly to the question that you're asking is that the prompt for the story slam, so it was 5 minute stories and they gave a prompt, and then so it has to be true, it has to be about you, it has to be on topic, and the prompt was, what is love? And because it was around Valentine's Day. And there was 10 of us that were telling at the event, and I had been telling a lot of kind of heavy stories up until then. I'd gone through a personal tragedy, and I kind of like had worked out a lot of that through storytelling. And I was like, well, I think for this one, I'm gonna not, I told that story times. So I decided to tell a story that related to work. And so in that tale, God, years ago, I was working with a coach, and my assignment was to show up as myself no matter what. And so I was going into this networking event, and it was a lunch. It was a fancy restaurant. There's all the white tablecloths and everything. And it was a small group, like the group of 12. And we all sat down, and the woman leading it was like, okay, let's go around the table and, introduce ourselves. And when the first person started, I realized that I was going to be last because of where I was sitting. She was directly across from me and was going to go all the way around. And I was already a little nervous because I was like, oh, I'm going to, you know, I've made this commitment. And she started talking, and, she's telling her tried and true elevator speech. And one by one, there's like the wealth planner, the interior designer, the real estate agent, all those folks. And then when it came to me, I was like, am I just going to do my tried and true elevator speech, or am I going to, kind of flip the script and be real? And anyway, I ended up doing this exercise that I had learned, which is called If You Really Knew Me. So if you really knew me, and you go 3 levels down, if you really knew me, you'd know that I do personal storytelling. If you really, really knew me, you'd know that I'm honored and appreciated to do the work that I do. And if you really, really knew me, you'd know that, I really find it a gift that I get to listen to people on a very deep level, because as I was in my younger days, I didn't necessarily feel so, seen or heard. And so they were all kind of looking at me weird. And then I said, instead of me talking about my work more, I'd be really interested if we go around the table and people can share something about them, either personally or professionally. And I mean, they were all looking at me like I felt like maybe they were looking at me like I was nuts. But one by one, they all started to share, and they all shared stuff that was personal. And by the end of that lunch, instead of all of us just like trying to get out of the door, like, oof, that's over, everybody lingered and they all knew each other on a much deeper level. And so the point is that I was super nervous to do that. But then what was on the other side was this really magical connective moment because we got to see each other as who we really are. So on one hand, like reading the room of, oh my God, are they all going to think I'm crazy, to kind of creating a space for people to get to show up as who they really are. So yeah, it's a balancing act.
Well, thank you for sharing that story because I was sitting here and I was like, okay, I want to challenge people to do that. Like, one, that sounds fun. Um, But April, this has been such an insightful conversation about the power of our stories and how they can truly transform how we show up in the world. And even in that last example you just gave of like how that can transform a networking opportunity and relationship building. So, April, how can people get in touch with you if they want to connect with you?
You can visit my website, aprilbell.com, or email me at hello@aprilbell.com. But yeah, everything all the different things that I'm up to and different ways to connect with me are right there on my website.
Thank you, April, for all of your insight today.
Thank you, Olivia, for having me. I really appreciate it. It's been lovely talking to you.
It has been great. And a few of our key takeaways from today's conversation include, did something change in your story? So, April brought this up in the beginning when you're trying to decide and figure out your wisdom story. Is there that nugget of information where something, whether pivotal or not, changed? You learned from it and it directed your path forward, as well as every day can be an extraordinary day. And that, I loved how April brought that up because that's really a mindset on how you show up every day and even on the hard times. Like today can be a good day, even if it's not going exactly as planned. And there's probably a story within that as well as something obvious to you, a story, a moment is something amazing to others. So, as April had brought up earlier as well, practice your stories if you're trying to figure out what are those stories. Talk to people, practice, tell a story to a friend, and tell what you think is the obvious story and part of your day because it can be amazing and impactful to someone else. Like April brought up and talked about how she told a story and it really impacted someone else enough to make a life-altering decisions and paths forward from listening to a story that April was like, yeah, this is obvious. This is what I would talk about. This is what I would say. And as well as start listening for the stories in your life. Listen for those moments, talk to friends, see ways to connect with them. And then I have two challenges, not one, but two for everyone this week. Listen and tell stories to your friends and family and look for the connection points between the conversation you're having and the story you're telling, as well as if you really knew me. So I want everyone this second challenge to sit down today and at least one other time this week and do a if you really knew me, the three levels of that April brought up. This was a great episode with our top-notch guest, April Bell. Thank you for listening and have a successful day.